So now it's time to hear the secrets of public speaking from our coaches of Talk the Talk. So please welcome on stage Henkka Hyppönen, Bruce Oreck, Linda Liukas, Saku Tuominen, and André Chaker. And the panel discussion will be moderated by pitching coach and official uncle of Startup Sauna, Aape Pohjavirta.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. This is not a task that we would not accept. This is not a task that we would not achieve. This is a task of becoming the best speaking nation in the world. It is a task that has already been accomplished. Who was that? I will use these mannequins of perfection actually to display their capabilities of being fluent in expressing themselves, the emotions and the cultural backgrounds and the future of humanity all in small 137 character long tweets. I'll start with Henkka Hyppönen. So every one of these persons will introduce themselves and the reason for their existence with a maximum of 137 characters within a time space of 7 seconds. Henkka, 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm here to raise hell.
Thank you. And your name was?
Henry Hyppönen.
Henry Hyppönen.
Yeah.
With I or Y?
With I.
So there's no Y in your life, it's just I in your life. So you're an egoist.
Definitely.
Saku.
Yeah, nice.
My name is Saku Tuominen and I'm here to improve everything.
Linda, please.
My name is Linda Kaisa Liukas and it's my real name.
Bruce, according to the theme of the US election, you're in the middle. You're not there and you're not here. Why are you there?
It was the last seat left.
I stole this one from you.
He stole, that's right. I'm Bruce Oreck, and despite rumors to the contrary, the United States did not take away my passport. I choose to be in Finland.
Okay, cool. And André, we know who you are.
Yeah, André Chaker, and I am the fucking frog. And I believe in being different.
Okay, cool. So the task at hand is how to create a nation of great speakers. Is there a nation of great speakers that you would be aware of? And how, Henkka, you're a guy who started with a voice, and you had to, behind the voice and your skills of actually speaking well on a public radio, and then you had to create a person and skills behind it. Was it that way? That first was the voice and then became the man?
Yeah, actually, it was that way, because I started in the radio just doing voiceovers. So in that sense, it is.
Oh, you're the one.
Yeah. Hey, you know, the voice of God stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it really doesn't work that way. I mean, you cannot like build a character in that way. You have to have like some ideas. And the idea that I've already have since I was 11 years old was how to maximize whatever you do. So I started, when I was playing ice hockey, I really started to train my mental images and stuff like that to get better in ice hockey. So there was like always this idea behind there that how can you go as an individual from where you are to the next stage. And then I realized that, okay, when you're learning this stuff, you can actually give it to some other people. And not necessarily in a way that those are particular advices, but you can inspire people, give some tools, and maybe people will use them. And if they see that it's helpful, then you can do it as a profession also.
Okay, so speaking is a good profession. Let's ask, for example, Linda. Linda, do you make money by speaking?
Yes. But it's a good profession.
Linda, do you have financial difficulties in your life?
Sometimes, yes.
No, that's the wrong answer. You should say no. So speaking is a good profession, right? Linda, when did you notice that speaking was important for your, like Henkka said, he used, I actually didn't understand what he said, but it sounded good.
Usually people with normal mental ability understand what I say, but...
Don't look at me,
Yeah.
tough crowd.
Linda, when and how and why did you notice that that you had to learn to speak?
So I grew up with poetry. I did poetry recitals. I was that kind of a girl when growing up. So I always did spoken word poetry, and I knew that never let me sing, but do let me read poems. But it was actually 2008 when we last had the elections, when I discovered like a hobby of mine that I actually made all of our participants do, and it was called speech karaoke. So what we would do is we took the Barack Obama Iowa caucus speech from 2008, and we would read together with Obama the speech. And he's such a slow speaker. He goes like, with a mother from Kansas and a father from Kenya, and with a story that could only happen in the United States of America, and so forth. And that's how I began my speaking career, by imitating other people.
But was there a reason for that?
And for the speaking? Yeah. In the beginning, no. I think, but that wouldn't have made me into a good speaker. I was technically good.
Were you? I saw you back then, and
But I didn't have a story.
I have a bad memory.
No. I think the speaking career started when I actually had a story to share with the world.
Yeah. Okay, good. Saku, I'll give you 45 seconds.
For what?
When did you notice that talking was an integral part of what you do?
I'd say that my biggest passion in life is to make great things. And what is interesting with great things is that most of the people are against them because it feels difficult and it shouldn't be done and complicated and fussy and so on and so on. And in order to be able to make great things, you have to convince people. And talking is a good way to convince people. But the key thing in here is that no matter how good you are, if the other party is not affected and so on, nothing happens. So it's not only about delivery, it's not only about techniques, it's about how credible you are, it's about passion and so on and so on. So for me, the essence of talking is trying to convince people on doing something great.
Mm. Good. 3 seconds to spare.
Yeah. So you said 45 seconds.
Yeah. He's a professional. And looking at these two, the frog and then the...
However.
You have a dog?
Yeah.
But he's not a dog. Right?
He looks credible, you don't, but you're in the middle and you're big. So...
Careful where you're going with this then, right?
Yeah. Well, we do sauna every now and then.
So I want to ask you a question. So how many of you, if you were going to assess your own comfort and skill in speaking, would you say you're a great public speaker? Okay, so I want to take something away from you then. I want to take away that myth. Because I want to be clear about something. When I was a young kid, I went to the school for the deaf to learn to speak. I went to the school for the deaf to learn to speak. Everyone is a great speaker. The question is, have you allowed yourself to be present in your own life?
Okay, thank you, Bruce. That was 45 seconds.
Yeah.
You didn't answer the question I was
I wasn't interested in your question.
No. So, André.
Careful, Aape. Bruce is tough.
I hear all these laughs. Yeah. So, André, please answer my simple question. What moment in your life did you understand that public speaking in front of people, is important? What moment, when, how, and why?
For me, it was perpetual brainwashing. And we had a person in our family. My father was a literature professor at McGill University in Montreal. And our family hero, the hero of all people who speak my language from the year 1950 1930-something to 1980-something, is a very pitiful man. He's a poor young general at the time who lost his army in 3 weeks. Poor chap. And then he had to flee from his country as a refugee to a place called London, England. And then he met a guy called Winston Churchill. And then he said, you know, Winston, I lost my army in 3 weeks. It was a very swift defeat. And what do I do now? And then Winston said, you know, I have a solution for you. Here's a microphone and a radio show on shortwave radio, Charles. And at the end of every radio show, I want you to you know, call your people to action. You know, say something, you know, inspiring. And at every show, every week, le Général de Gaulle would say, Vive la France! Vive la France libre! And at the end of every show, there would be hundreds of thousands of French people, you know, hitting on some German on the street. For him, and this is the cultural difference with Finland, is that for him, speaking, and for many French people, speaking is an act, an important act. As you know, I was speaking at an event. I'm going over here 45 seconds. I remember when
just a few.
But you know, it's you know the value of speaking as an act, yeah. you know, is different here. So
thank
yes,
you. So good. Thank you.
Finish,
Yeah.
please.
So now here we can.
But anyway,
No. Cut the cable. Now. This is interesting because he's saying that, was it a French Canadian? Who was this Charles de Gaulle? It's an airport where they lose luggage and all that stuff. Are you telling that there's a cultural difference between Finns?
You didn't give me time to finish, so figure it out.
I gave you 45 seconds. Swiss do miracles in 45 seconds.
But that's
Can I ask you a question? Because
yes.
I mean, people are sending me messages here that who is actually the one who's hosting the panel because he's super annoying. So can you introduce yourself to the camera in 7 seconds and what you're here to do?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, out of time. Okay. And then the next question is that it's actually not even a question. It says that panel discussions should be forbidden by law. And I agree with that. I mean, we've heard great speeches. This is just like complete bullshit after this.
We need to reformat this.
Yes.
We need to reformat.
Yes. Good. Henkka, now that the Twitter has elected you as the king.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a cultural difference between Finns and Finland and the rest of the world, French or Canadian or whatever frogs are?
No, I don't like to see things as cultural differences. I mean, there's a school background different. Like in America, people are debating in the school. We don't have that system. We maybe should have that kind of system in Finland in place. I mean, speaking and expressing your thoughts, like Saku said, it's a very important part of getting those wonderful things done that are in your head, in your mind. And you need to be very good and on the substance side. And I think in Finland we are very good on substance side, very intelligent people. And we need to learn that part where we can, even if it's a harsh word like marketing, to market those ideas that people who have money, who have possibilities and markets there can take that idea. And I think it's hugely important for everybody here to get the tax money and stuff like that. So it's a combination of two things, like getting the emotion there and then getting the substance there. And that was what I was also looking for in the speeches today. And it was wonderful. Thank you very much for all the speakers today. It was a great job.
How do you see this?
Well, already when I was giving my short lesson for the speakers and so on, we were discussing is that there's so many areas on what is a great speaker and what are the requirements. Because either you can be hosting, you can be pitching, you can be giving a keynote, you can be convincing, you can give a small talk. And I think that there are kind of like different kind of requirements for each of those. So there might be a person who is brilliant in giving a keynote, but not great in hosting, for example. And I can.
You're looking at me.
and already kind of like I'm not going to be revealing anything. But when we were trying to judge who's the winner, we ended up in kind of like disagreement or kind of like argument where we were discussing is that are we judging the best speech or the best person giving the speech? So is it about the content of the speech? Is it about the delivery? And that's also kind of like crucial part of making Finns the best speaking nation in the world, meaning what do you mean? And like Henkka said, I come always from the content point of view. So even if the delivery is great, if the content is bad, I'm not excited. If the content is brilliant, but the delivery is okay, that's fine.
So how is Linda, you came, it was a poems were a hobby of yours. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to, Bruce, you having gone through the education system of that Henkka addressed that we don't have in Finland. Yeah. I would like to hear, what is the role of the hobbies? And also, do they activate people to perform better?
The role of the
hobbies.
Hobbies.
Not hobbits.
Hobbies.
Hobbies.
To some extent, yes, but I'd say the number one feedback I got in business school in Communications 101 was always this. Linda, you need to learn to do professional business speaking, and it means that you should be a little bit more credible, speak a little bit more slower, speak a little bit more lower, like lower your voice, and then like lose all of that giggling nonsense. And like those 4 things have made me into the speaker I am today by being my own personality. And I like echo Saku's idea that like seeing a diversity of speakers is one of the ideals that we should be giving to the people over here. That being a speaker doesn't only mean that you're the credible middle-aged man in the TV news. It means a variety of things.
And I think that's so important. Because there are myths about public speaking, very powerful myths around the world, but in Finland, very strong. And I disagree with Henkka to a certain point that I believe that it is culturally driven. The fact that you don't have this in a school system affects the culture around speaking and the way you relate to speaking. I'm actually writing a book called Speak or Die for next year about breaking these myths that, you need to do this, and, it's bullshit, And we need to break these myths. And when you've done that, then you are free to really be your genuine, powerful own speaker.
Yeah. But there is an educational difference. There's a fundamental educational difference. And I would sum it up in 3 words. It's called show and tell. From the time we entered schools in the U.S., literally first grade on, there's a certain amount of time every week in the class where you're invited up to the front of the room to speak about whatever it is. Here's my used Kleenex, my grandmother's dentures, my dead cat.
Your grandmother's dentures?
We don't care what it is, right? It's not the time. It's the idea that your voice is important, what your thoughts are important, and then learning to express them and do so in front of people. And that is actually a core part of the American curriculum from start to finish. Because in the end, no matter how good your ideas are, if you cannot touch, move, and inspire people, the idea ends right here. And so we take that as a real fundamental. To André's point, and I hate agreeing with André.
I have to savor the moment now.
Exactly. One time. Don't let it get your head. Is that I think you can make a cultural change, and I think there is a cultural difference simply by flipping that switch in the educational system. And Finns have great stories to tell. Finns have a lot of valuable thoughts and emotions and ideas, but they're stuck inside. And so this to me, if I could change one thing in Finland, would be putting this piece in the educational process at every level, starting right now, and in very short order, Finns would be able to tell stories at a world-class level.
Yeah. If I can say one thing about this, we started talking about cultural differences. My point is that I agree with you, but the point is that especially in the times like this that we're living, if our default answer is always culture or sex or these kind of differences, we're in deep trouble. Now we are in so complicated change and transition at the moment, so we should be very careful of putting any cultural labels or any labels to being man or woman. We shouldn't keep that as a default setting. We should always look beyond that first and maybe come to biology or maybe come to like cultural differences after that. But this is why I stated
it's only
that.
one part of the equation.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Saku, you had a point about the education system. And
Actually not. I had a completely different point.
Aape, if you'd like to go home now.
I can go.
Don't be like Aape. He's doing a good job.
No, I'm not doing it.
You're picking up. You're picking up. You're gonna be fine.
There's kind of like an area in speaking which we haven't been touching at all, and I think we all have to agree is that in most of the cases, most of the speeches we give kind of like they have similar elements. So we have something that works, then we continue, we modify a bit, then we improve, then we modify a bit, and so on. So if we take like 1,000 best speakers in the world, I'd say that 60–70% of the speeches are kind of like their similarities. So I think that one of the key things for all of these is that they kind of like give the speech in here, and that's it. And for me, one of the key things is how do you improve from here? So it's not only giving the speech, but it's also listening to the audience. So when I'm pitching something, I'd say that, yeah, but the middle part was not great. I was losing the audience. I have to rework with that one. The ending was fantastic. I make it a bit longer. And I'd say that for all the speakers, one of the key things would be is that what was the thing that really worked? What was the thing you had a sensing is that I was sort of like losing the audience, and then concentrate on kind of like keeping the best parts and improving the parts that didn't work. And then you give it second time, then you give it third time, then you give it fourth time, and then you are excited. And for example, the blackout, for example, which was for me in the audience, nothing kind of like great. That would be fantastic that in speech number 3 or 4 or 5, that's kind of like included in the speech because it's a great way to make the point that was the essence of the speech. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about that all. It was great.
Yeah. Okay, now how would we facilitate something like this that, you know, people, because you do these in the, for example, you in your profession, you work with companies, you have people within the same company dealing with communication and rehearsing their speeches and talks, but how could we extend this beyond those borders of the single individual companies or corporate cultures, or how could we make this a fun hobby?
Yeah. I used to do that like 10 years ago, but anyway, the idea is that always when I took a customer, then the first idea was that you will say yes to every opportunity to speak.
Yes.
No matter what. Yeah. So that's what you have to do. There's no way around it. So if people have some ideas and they think that world needs to hear those ideas, then you have to just hone the skills. And like Saku said, there's a process there. If you say yes to every single one of those, then you will have the opportunity to make it better and to evolve the speech. And that should be something that people do individually and make the decision. And it's scary as hell at first, but then you learn to even use the fear aspect of the speech as an energy, and you notice that, okay, it actually helps.
I want to follow up on that, because I think, again, on these points, then there's a cultural piece here again.
You know, he didn't like the culture thing.
Well, no, I mean, I get it, but it's not that you're not crippled. It's not like there's a defect here. It's just an opportunity. And in the United States, we just take a great deal of pride in the amount of times we screw up, right? We fuck up more than we get it right. But we're not embarrassed about it. Maybe we should be, but we're not. And let's not talk about the current election.
So that's a bit of a fuck up.
That's off the table. But you're exactly right. The only way to become a great speaker is to do it. You can't read about it. You have to do it, which means you're going to make mistakes. There are going to be speeches for all of us when we do speaking. There are times you come home and you go, that was lousy. I just bombed on that one. It happens all the time, and you just have to be willing to do it. So to Henkka's point, you always say yes. Don't be afraid of it. It's how you learn. You're not afraid to ride a bike or learn to do something else. You just have to go do it, and you will bomb. We all bomb. André bombs most of the time.
Yeah. He's known for that. He bounces back. Baby. He bounces
just following
back.
your lead.
Yeah. What was your first failure, André? Was there a moment when you said, "I won't do it again"?
As a speaker, my first failure.
Where you said that you wouldn't do it again.
Oh my God, I do that all the time. I learn every day, every speech. I said, that didn't work. I'm gonna improve it. It's continuous improvement all the time. You're just learning. And one skill also that we haven't talked about that I would like to thank all our speakers that is so important and is so critical, I believe, to speaking. Of course, there's the form and function of speech. But in the function, the content is very important. But a belief in this country is that content will save you if you just regurgitate all of the facts and data at people. Data, fact, data, and there, I've done my job. One skill that is in preparation, which we did together when I met them, is that how do you embed these facts and this data into a powerful story about your relative, about your friend who has difficulty, about people you've seen, to embed your story, your insight into a powerful story that, and I had a person ask me, is it okay to use emotion? This is really a real, in speech, that it's only okay if that emotion in that story will get you closer to your goal of communicating the three things you need to do for a speech, getting people to understand, remember, and act. So you learn that all the time. There's not one, you learn all the time.
There's one thing, language. English language, Finnish language, Swedish language. How do you go about learning to talk in a foreign language?
For me, it was horrible. Because, first when I started giving keynotes in English, I completely lost that who am I in English. Because language is so close to who you are, with all those attachments to your own emotions and to your history. So it was horrifying go to the stage first, and it wasn't about like vocabulary, it wasn't about the subjects, but it was like who am I?
The identity.
Yeah, because I didn't get the feeling, the connection with the words, and it took me a long time to learn that. Okay, that now I'm me speaking English.
That's great.
Linda, how was your language trip?
The language trick was okay, but the subjects I talk about tend to be pretty technical. And one of the things I've tried to do lately is sort of explain how the cell phone works from the electricity level all the way up. And that's been like one of the biggest bombs I've ever done, where the audience is just looking at me like, I don't understand what she's doing. And I remember feeling like blushing and the stinking feeling in my stomach. And then actually, how to prepare for those moments. I've learned from two of the panelists here. So I used to do André's slides back when he worked at Veikkaus. So I did the PowerPoint slides, and it forced me to look through a lot of presentations and a lot of different structures.
And thank you for that.
Thank you. And then when I was first starting as a public speaker, I spoke with Henkka, and you gave me an advice that you should approach public speaking like stand-up comedians, that you shouldn't only aim to do A-level stuff. Even stand-up comedians have D-level blocks in there, because if you don't do D-level things, your A's will never stand out. And then also that stand-up comedians have modules that they can switch and swap and change material throughout. And I'm still gonna do that electricity to logic gates to bits to application story, but it's just going to require quite a lot of practice before the audience is going to stick through it with me.
And I myself concentrate on D-level stuff.
Well, you're used to that.
Well, you do A-level too, but that's language is a very critical thing. I remember giving my first speech in Finnish. I was sweating. I thought I can never do this.
You're sweating now too. Saku has a point there.
Yeah, but you might sweat it out, but it's the courage to get out there and make those mistakes and then learn from them. And that's clear.
Saku, I saw you speaking in Paris at the OECD forum, and you spoke well. The one thing that I noticed when there were good questions were posed to you, there were subject matter questions, and you wanted to respond because he had been able to sort of gather the crowd and it was a really good thing. The answers you gave were not that fluent.
Not that
fluent in English. And this is something you, regardless of the language thing, I'm using you as a positive example, regardless of this language thing, you went and performed extremely well. So do you think that language is being used, speaking in foreign language is used as an excuse for not doing things?
What should I say? kind of like my key point, when I was discussing with all the speakers, and I was going through all the advice people are giving to anyone who is giving speeches or whatever, there's a list of 10 things that you should, just like Linda, and none of them had the word content in them. And I think that no matter what you do, it's all about content, what you have to say. And then I'm fully aware is that my English is far from perfect. I'm making mistakes and so on. But the key thing for me is that I'm doing things. So I'm doing a lot of things, and then I'm talking about the things I do. And people tend to like it. So I'm not saying is that this is what you should do, blah, blah, blah. And then if someone would be asking is that, what have you done yourself? And I'd say nothing, I'm just giving you advice. That's a bad story. So if you are doing great things, if you are doing interesting things, people forgive you all the faults in your language.
Yeah.
I don't speak Finnish, and I apologize for that. But I will say this, that Finns, in general, speak English better than most English speakers. If you've ever listened to it, listen to Donald Trump talk. Okay, I'm not going to go there. But you listen to a lot of Americans speak, and they butcher the language. And we're used to hearing it. Everyone speaks English, and we're used to hearing all sorts of accents and all sorts of grammar that may not be perfect. We don't care. Never let your English skills hold you back. I'm telling you, as Finns, your English skills are superb. We want to know who you are. We want to hear your story. Don't get stuck up on the grammar, or I don't have exactly the right word. We don't care. We want to know who you are. And that's the ultimate bit about storytelling, is we're all hungry to know each other. But we can't if you don't know how to tell the story.
Cool. And be yourself, know your content, go out and tell the world what your content is all about, what you are about, what you're doing. I think is that a sound piece of advice for everyone?
Good summary. Good.
Thank you.
Hey,
okay.
Aape, thank you. You did a great job, even though we picked on you.
Give it a hand for Aapo. Aapo.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. So we're done. They're done. I'm done.
Round of applause for the coach.
We're out of here.